All right, welcome to the November 2022 edition of Michigan Gardener. And despite it being like fall, all the leaves are coming off the trees, everything, it's kind of a ho-hum, like cloudy day. There's still a lot of work that we can do in the garden. And one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to get ready for spring with my, get out of there, with my planters. And so we have a fall planter here, and I have mums in here. This was a mixed mums, but they've gone over. The plants are still alive, but the flowers are no good anymore. So it's time to get this ready for spring, and luckily I have it in a nice pot here. We can reuse that pot later, but I still have this planter. And the first thing we're going to do is reduce the size of the container a little bit. I have a little disc thing that fits down inside there, and there's holes in it so there's good drainage, but these two holes are a little too big and soil will fall through there, so I just have a piece of broken pot that I'll put over the top of that. And to that I'm just going to add a little bit of dirt, because we have some things that we need to add on top of this. So I'm going to start with the bottom layer being some tulips. This is a variety called Alperdorns, and it's like a pink and orange and yellow mixed tulip. And I'm planting these on the bottom because we're going to layer them, and they're going to come up at different times than the rest of the bulbs we're putting in there. So remember, pointy end goes up. I've got 10. I'm just going to pack them in here real nice. And now that I've got those tucked in, I'm going to put a little layer of dirt on top. Now those are going to come up later than the next things I'm going to put down. And next, I'm going to plant some Muscari armeniacum. So Muscari comes from the Greek word muscus, which means musk, because it has a musk-like scent. And armeniacum is something to do with apricots, but these are just grape hyacinths, and they work well. I've planted these before. I really like them. I'm just going to chuck a few of these in here, like maybe a dozen. And amongst those, I'm going to plant a variety of narcissus called Replete, and it's like a white and orangish narcissus. And the hyacinths and narcissus should come up about the same time. They'll come up before the tulips. So I'm just going to chuck a bunch of these down in there. And it's fine to pack them in when you're doing it this way. My favorite variety of narcissus, and I want no sniggering in the back there, and the only reason it's my favorite, it really doesn't look any different from regular yellow narcissus, is because of the name, and it's Narcissus assoanus. But I have looked and looked and looked, and the only place you can buy them is from like websites in the UK, because they have a better sense of humor than we do. And now we'll chuck some more dirt on top of those. This is just basic, this is a compost called flower dew. It's like manure from dairy farms in Michigan. And I mix it with grit for drainage. This is like number 4 grit or something like that. I'm a big fan of that. It really promotes drainage and prevents rotting and things like that. Maybe just a little bit more, like so, so that those are all covered. And now we have one final layer to put in, and this will be it, and this will come up first. All right, and then so finally, the first thing that's going to come up out of this pot is crocuses. And I have a mix of crocuses. There's actually two different species in here. There's Crocus vernus and Crocus flavus, and three varieties. There's yellow mammoth, pickwick, and Jeanne d'Arc, or Jeanne d'Arc. And these come up, these are the first things that come up, and they're teeny tiny little flowers, and there's really not much foliage to them, so we're going to chuck a bunch of these in there. And remember, like with any bulb, there's a right side up, and we want to make sure we get that right side up. And now we've kind of scattered those around. We're going to cover them up to the top of the thing here. And I'm going to dress the top of this with some grit. That will just help if water gets in here, or you know, if stuff splashes off the gutters and gets in here, it'll keep the soil in place and kind of deflect some of that so we don't accidentally uncover our bulbs over the winter. For, I don't know, maybe $10 worth of bulbs and $5 worth of compost and grit, we're going to have a glorious planter that blooms up until like May, I would think. And then the thing is we're not done there, because we get to keep those bulbs and we can put them elsewhere and they'll regrow again and again and again. So I have a thing against planting annuals. I like to plant perennials, and this is a perfect spring planter for me, and we'll look forward to this all winter long. Later on in the episode, Gretchen's going to show you how she does her planters, but first she's going to help us with an experiment with our mums.
All right, we're out here next to the raspberries. We actually, at November 1st, still have some raspberries on the bushes. We are going to put the mums from out front out here. Nobody will bother them out here. We're not really sure if they'll live. Normally I don't plant things in November because I worry that perennials won't have time to develop a root system before winter, but we really have nothing to lose with these mums. They're also going to go next to a little mistake that we had. When we purchased lavender to go around our pawpaw trees earlier in the summer, a naughty garden center employee told us, yes, you can divide lavender. Well, you're not supposed to divide woody plants, and we did not know that. So we took the two that we had divided and stuck them in here, and they did live even though I only watered them once. So we'll see if they survive the winter. Okay, so I'm just going to stick this into the ground. We can always dig it up later next fall if we want to use it for planters again. And these are late flowering perennials, and we're really going to try and attract more pollinators into the garden by using perennials and annual flowers. So I think it'll do double duty, attract pollinators, and we can hopefully, if it lives, reuse it in potted arrangements. Okay, one more fall job that I don't usually do, but that I am going to do this year is cut back all of the hostas. We have a puppy that keeps eating the hosta leaves, and they are not good for dogs. And the other thing is they are a breeding ground for slugs, which are a problem where we live because it's kind of damp anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut these back, and you just cut them close to the ground. You don't have to be super careful. And that's all there is to it.
It's my turn. I'm sorry if I look a little lopsided because I've got a big abscess in my jaw right now and I'm really, really sick, but it helps me to garden. This is that garden that I made that's kind of circular with the box hedges and things, and initially I planted some lupines back here, but all the lupines died, and so I'm going to try another thing here. And these are Alliums, and it's a member of the onion family, and they have kind of low foliage and they grow like a little spike with a kind of a ball-shaped flower on the top of it, and they can be different colors. And these ones are supposed to be white, pink, and purple. It's like a mix that I got from MichiganBulb.com. And the thing I like about Alliums is that they're kind of like a whole year plant. So even after and I'm sorry about the chainsaw in the background. Apparently they're like logging back there, like, you know, big blue ox, like, you know, olden times. Anyway, with the Alliums, they're kind of a whole year plant, like I was saying, and even after they're done blooming, they'll leave like a flower spike behind with a little deadhead on it, and I'll show a little picture of that. But these ones you want about, it says 6 to 10 inches apart, and you want to dig them 4 to 6 inches deep. And like with any bulb, you want to plant them in the fall. And there's an upside and a downside. It looks like a miniature bulb of garlic, and so like the root side of the garlic you're going to put down, obviously. And hopefully next year we'll have a little patch of Alliums in here, and we'll see what it does. Like, you just never know. Like all this gardening stuff, like you never know if something's going to take. The other thing that I forgot to say earlier is the Armeniacum, the grape hyacinths. The reason they're called Armeniacum is not because they're apricots, it's because apricots initially came from Armenia and then went to Rome, and so they were called Armeniacum. And then there's a bunch of bulbs from that area, including grape hyacinths and Turkey, and all those places have crocuses and things. One crocus I forgot to tell you about, and I can't believe I forgot it, is Crocus sativa, and it's the #1 cultivated crocus in the world. Can you guess why? I'll wait. Anyway, it's saffron. So it's a purple crocus that grows, and the little hair-like things in there, what are those called? Like stigma?
Either stigma or stamen.
Stigma or stamen. Either way, there's little orange, yellow / whatever stamen that grow out of the center of those flowers, and it takes 60,000 crocus flowers to make 1 kilogram of saffron, and 1 kilogram of saffron sells for $10,000. So very valuable plant. Next year, I think we're going to put in a bed of those just for the lulz, because I can't possibly plant 60,000 of these damn things. But it would be cool to have my own saffron rice from saffron that I grew. So how are we going to plant these? So here's our Alliums. I have my ground space. This is a bit. We're going to put this in here. And you can buy these like bulb bits just about anywhere. And I'm just going to drill a bunch of holes and we'll drop these in. Pretty close packed. We can always dig them up next year and move them if we need to. Oops. So we're going to put in some good holes here. And hopefully, I like the way that plants look when they're in like a little cluster like this. And that was kind of the thing of this garden, was it was supposed to have little compartments, and you know, we'll see how it works. I'm always being pressured into putting stuff in here that I don't want, but I do think the Alliums will make sense in here. Get out of there. What are you doing? All right, so Gretchen's gonna plant these, and I guess we'll see what they do next year. Your dog will always try to help you. Alliums are also very, very well mixed in amongst hostas, and I've always said we have way too many hostas anyway. So one of the projects this fall is going to be to dot some alliums in amongst our hostas on the property and just see if we like the way it looks and what comes up, what doesn't. But, well, there's another fall project for you. Now, if you look behind me, you'll see those two nice bushes that have some whitish and reddish leaves. Those are burning bushes. And growing right up the middle of it is an invasive species. That tree is called a buckthorn. It's native to Europe, but not native to here. And if you find it in your garden, it shouldn't be there. That tree shouldn't be there. Not only is it crowding out my bushes, but it's casting shade over my garden that I don't want. So we're going to take that out today. When I'm taking down a tree, if I have the chance, I normally like to start high and then come back rather than try to cut the whole thing down, because those smaller branches, if they fall somewhere I don't want them, aren't going to cause as much havoc as if I cut the whole damn tree down at once and it falls somewhere I don't want it. So I've got a handy dandy little chainsaw on a stick that comes in, works great for this sort of thing. There. So the next step is going to be to pull these limbs out of there, and then I can come along with a regular chainsaw at the base and take that all the way down without being in too much danger. These limbs will go out onto the burn pile, and we'll burn them with the Christmas tree in spring, adding some nutrients to our plot. So you can see it looks a lot different. We're getting a lot more light here. Eventually we're going to take and prune those bushes back to shape. The last people let it get kind of out of control. And then we'll have something pretty attractive with a low foreground, a medium midground, and a high background.
All right, so I'm over here in the mini pond, and we're gonna see if we can save these water plants for the year. And really, what I've read is that all you do is pull them out of the pond, put them in a plastic tub, we'll fill it with a little water, and then I think we'll just stick it in a basement window.
All right, these two little oak trees that I've miniaturized were taken from red oak acorns on Ethan Becker's property in Tennessee. I think like got to be at least 10 years ago. And this is the first year where I've decided I'm going to try to keep them outside, because really they should go through winter. They tend to get confused and bud early and then have problems if you keep them inside all year. So I think this year we're going to at least try to winterize these. I found a nice sheltered corner from wind. Should be a little warmer here. And then this other one was just a bush that had mostly died, and I decided to dig it up and see what we can do with it. it may or may not do much, and if it doesn't, I didn't lose anything, because the alternative to just doing this was to throw it away. So we'll try it. And now for a little extra insulation, I'm gonna throw some leaves over that, and hopefully in the spring we'll uncover it and everything will be good. Okay. I have an interesting plant to show you. This is growing kind of all over the property on the edge of the woods. And this plant is called pokeweed. That's the common name. Another common name for it is inkberry. The Latin name for this plant is Phytolacca americana, because it's native to the East Coast, the Midwest, and the west parts of the West Coast. You can find it in scattered areas. Now, the phyto part of that is Greek, and the lacca part of that is Latin. So whoever named it, like, I don't know why they picked two different languages, but phyto means plant, and lacca means crimson lake. And the crimson lake comes from the color of the stems as they mature. This one is dyed, and because it's fall, actually probably late fall, because all the leaves are off the trees. This is what it looks like as it's grown. And this plant, when it was tall, would have been about 8 feet tall. Typically, these grow between 4 and 10 feet tall. It's a perennial, meaning it comes back every year, and it has a really large white taproot that a new plant will spring from. And there's a cluster of it here. Like I said, you find it kind of on the edge of the woods, and all through here it's growing. And it has these clusters of blue berries that the birds really like, particularly the northern mockingbirds. Sometimes this is grown as an ornamental plant. Like there's some people in the UK that grow these, and they've produced varieties that have variegated leaves and things like that. It's poisonous to mammals, so dogs, people, and livestock. So if this gets mixed in with hay, it can cause a real problem. One of the reasons it was called inkberry is because these berries back in olden time were made to make ink, or used to make ink. The poke in pokeweed comes from the Algonquin Indian word pocan, or P-O-C-C-A-N, and so it's pokeweed. Throughout time, it's been used as herbal medicine for a bunch of various different things, and it's been studied scientifically, and we can't really find actual human health benefits to the plant, at least in terms of a medicine. And the berries are currently being studied as a way to control zebra mussel populations. I'm going to grow a patch of this out in the vegetable garden for a local chef. A local chef, but it's poisonous. Yes, it is. There's a dish that you can make out of this when it's real young before it's started to flower, and it's called
poke salad.
There's a song by Tony Joe White that when I had my fevers from my jaw abscess ran through my head day and night, 24 hours a day, and so I've been obsessed about this plant. What you do is when it's real young, you can grab the leaves off of it. The leaves and the stems are edible when it's young, up to early summer. But you can't just eat them off of the tree, and in fact, people say poke salad. It's not poke salad, it's poke sallet, S-A-L-L-E-T. And the word sallet is from French for cooked greens. You can't just cook them any old way either. You have to collect the leaves and then boil them for 20 minutes, then drain the water, put the leaves in a colander, wash them off really, really well, then boil them again for 20 more minutes, then boil them again for 20 more minutes, every time washing in between. And then typically you would take those greens and fry them in bacon grease and add a little bacon. There are poke salad festivals all over the South, and it was pretty important in the diet in southern Appalachia because these leaves are loaded with vitamins and minerals. And you can imagine if you lived in an area and had a fairly poor diet, that having a plant that's basically free that you can find anywhere that you can eat that has lots of good vitamins and minerals is a real boon. Although the plant is a perennial, so this will come back next year, it's actually spread by the birds eating these seeds and then pooping them out.
Oh, sick, dude!
So we'll watch this as we grow it in the garden next year. There were 2 companies in the United States that canned and sold poke salad, but the last one closed in 2000. You may have noticed this pile of stuff that's sitting in the center of our woods that we've been maintaining, and you may be saying to yourself, why pile it there when you're trying to make this look nice? Well, what this is a bunch of different stumps and roots and things that we pulled out, and we've piled them up, and we're piling leaves and used gardening compost and things like that on it, with the idea to make that into a little mound with interesting stumps and things like that. And then you plant different woodlands plants kind of tucked in there, like ferns and different wildflowers and things. That type of garden feature is called a stumpery, and it was really popular in England during the Victorian times. They take a little bit to get established. I think by this time next year, we'll have had a good bunch of leaf mold kind of settle in, and we've got a lot of different garden compost to dump on there. And I think it won't be long before we'll have some ferns growing out of here and different things like that, just as an added kind of interesting feature in this center woods here. You may remember from earlier in the year when I planted these 2 pawpaw trees and made kind of a formal bed around it, that I was a little bit cryptic about what I was going to plant in the center here. Well, now that it's November and we get, pretty cold at night, and the average temperature isn't quite in the 40s, but in another week or 2 we will. It's time to plant plants that need vernalization, or a cold period over winter. And there's 2 plants that I want to plant in here, and the first one is this. This is from seedballs.com, and it's Indian paintbrush. Well, Indian paintbrush is a plant native to the United States. It's especially prevalent along the west coast of all of the Americas. So all the way from Alaska down through the Andes Mountain, you'll find various variants of this plant. This particular one is a variety that's native to Minnesota and other parts of the Midwest, including Michigan. The scientific name is Castanea coccinea. The first part of that, Castanea, comes from Domingo Castanea, who was a famous and really accomplished Spanish botanist. The second part, coccinea, just means colored scarlet. Indian paintbrush, I just love it. It's one of the neatest plants to see growing. It's, kind of a spring, early summer plant flowering. It's a perennial, and it can take, several years to actually flower and get established. You're supposed to plant these seed balls kind of on the surface, half buried, about every foot. And we'll get started. I have 50 to put in this plot. Maybe too many, but I'm pretty sure not all of these are going to survive. So, time to get started. I'm just going to kind of plop them down. And I haven't planted these seed balls before, but the directions say to kind of press them down a little bit into the soil, into bare dirt, So we'll go around and do that for all of these. The other plant I'm going to put in here, so the Indian paintbrush is going to be scarlet. I most remember those from trips to the Grand Tetons. The other plant I'm going to put is blue, and this is Texas bluebonnet. The scientific name for that is Lupinus texensis, or texennis, depending on your source. But it's of the lupine family, and lupinus means of the wolf or wolf-like. I don't know how that came to be, but these are an annual, whereas the Indian paintbrush is a perennial, and they typically reseed. It's the Texas state flower, and I remember these from when I was a kid and we lived in Texas, and you'd see just massive fields of these growing everywhere. And it's because it's a state flower, and the Texas Highway Department seeds them all over the place. So in the early spring, it's a really pretty plant. Now, I'm not positive that this will do well here. It's an experiment. We'll see. But it should, because there's a lupine that's very, very similar to this that's native to Michigan, specifically to this area. I haven't found it, but I know it should grow here theoretically. This is another one of those plants that have to be vernalized, and it's best to plant them in the fall, let them overwinter, and then hopefully in the spring they'll come up. So for these, I have 2 packets. There's not very much in this packet, so we're going to rely on the other one more so. But I'm just going to kind of randomly scatter these all over, like wherever. So we're going to have some nice red and blue popping up. And now that I've scattered all those seeds, I'm just going to kind of walk through and just to be sure that everything has good contact with the soil. And now we just wait and hope. There's no other way to put it. These Texas bluebonnets, like I said, are annuals, but they reseed. And to get them to reseed, what you're supposed to do is just leave the flowers on the plant and don't mess with them. And eventually the seed pods will dry out, and you'll end up with seeds getting scattered kind of naturally like I just did. And hopefully we'll be able to get these established in here. If not, I'm happy to treat them like like an annual and just reseed them every year. It's not that big a deal. This garden we did earlier in the year, and it's going to be slightly more formal with a low box hedge around the front, and then kind of organized plantings. There's a couple roses there and a bunch of other plants through here. But I left these 2 wings as bare earth to plant some wildflowers in. Now this is a perennial wildflower mix by Earth Science Growth Essentials. And it comes mixed with like some fertilizer and such like this. And most of these wildflower seeds need to be vernalized. I'm not sure if they do that already, but they say you can plant these either in the fall now or in the spring once the average soil temperature is 60. But I'll scatter these, get these planted, and then after we scatter them, we just have to be sure to rake in just about a 1/4 inch deep, just so that the seeds have continuous contact with the soil. Like I said, it's a big mix of plants. It's got purple coneflowers, lance-leaved coreopsis, sweet William pinks, blanket flower, blue flax, oxeye sunflower, Shasta daisy, and a bunch of other crap in there. You never know what's going to come up and what's going to survive and what's going to make it year to year. It's a perennial, like I said, so that'll be nice. Won't be a whole lot of maintenance to do to this once this gets established. We're starting with bare earth, weed-free. Initially I put cardboard down and then put soil on the top. And this is good compost, so in theory we should be good to establish a nice wildflower bed there without need for a whole lot of maintenance. So first we'll just get this. Not sure, there's like some little pebbles in there as well. That's why I'm scattering it a little thicker. Like most of that is just pebbles, but there are some seeds in there. And I'm thinking about, haven't decided for certain, but I'm thinking about, as an insurance policy, doing this in the spring again as well. I'm going to put one other type of flower in here after we get this raked down, and I'll tell you about that in just a second. And this here is a mix of poppy seeds that I got from our local place. And poppies are another plant that you can start in spring, but you have to start them really, really early, or you can winterize them. And they do best if you just put them on the surface of the soil. So that's why I planted the others first, so I could rake that in. And then these, I'll just kind of scatter around and we'll see what takes. I have another packet of these seeds that I am probably gonna reseed again in the spring just to be sure that I get something coming up. These are an annual, meaning that they die off every year, but they produce copious amounts of seeds, and theoretically they should reseed themselves. We'll see if any of that actually happens.
All right, we're back on the front porch. We're gonna do all of these pots in layered bulbs for spring. So I'm just pulling out the dahlias. I'll box these up better later. And then we have some cannas that I'm gonna pull. I'm going to cut the tops off and store them in boxes in the garage over the winter, and then we can plant them out again in the spring. And that's all for the November Michigan Gardener. We'll see you back in December for a Christmas special and a couple things.